Firstpost reports from the world's second largest continent. Hello, I'm Alison Lagrange. A very warm welcome from Durban, South Africa. We get you the news and the newsmakers from Africa. From elections to climate change to innovations and opportunities. As the world's attention shifts, we report from Africa, the heart of the global south. Join me every weekday live on Firstpost. Hello and welcome to Firstpost Africa, where we get you the top stories from the continent and from across the world. I'm Alison Lagrange, coming to you live from Durban, South Africa. First, let's take a look at the headlines. The houses of the Pahalgam terror attack suspects demolished in Jammu and Kashmir. This came ahead of Indian Army Chief General Upendra Trivedi's Srinagar visit to assess the security situation in the valley. Kiev's mayor suggests Ukraine might have to temporarily cede land in a peace deal with Russia, acknowledging what he calls is a painful solution. Ukraine's President Zelensky firmly rejects giving up any territory. China says it is preparing for extreme scenarios amid a high-stakes trade war with the US. The remarks follow Donald Trump's hint at a potential trade deal with the Chinese government. The DRC and Rwanda are set to sign an agreement in Washington to foster peace and developments, aiming to ease violence fueled by Rwanda-backed rebels. Both countries hope it will attract US investments. And Nepal marks the 10th anniversary of the devastating 2015 earthquake, a disaster that claimed the lives of nearly 9,000 people and affected millions others. Prime Minister Ali observes a minute of silence at the exact moment of the quake. Hello and welcome. We begin in South Africa. US President Donald Trump's controversial plan to grant asylum to white South Africans is gaining momentum. While the US, under President Trump, has been deporting or blocking refugees from several countries, it's extending an invitation to some in South Africa. The US government is encouraging white South Africans facing what it calls perceived troubles at home to seek asylum. US officials have begun interviewing white South African applicants, questioning them over these alleged troubles. They are asking them about land disputes, crime, and claims of racial discrimination. Reports say the first round of interviews took place in Pretoria. Those interviewed described the process positively, saying US officials were exceptionally friendly and empathetic. More than 30 applicants have reportedly been approved for asylum already, though the US Embassy in Pretoria has yet to confirm any official numbers. But this move shows how serious the Trump administration is about the plan. In February, Trump issued an executive order to resettle Afrikaner refugees. Afrikaners are the descendants of mainly Dutch settlers, and as per Trump, they are quote-unquote victims of unjust racial discrimination. The basis for his accusation is land reform law signed by President Cyril Ramaphosa earlier this year. The law allows for land seizure without compensation under certain conditions. White South Africans still own over 70% of farmland. But Trump has accused the government of unfairly confiscating land, calling it a human rights violation. Now, this has triggered a full-blown diplomatic standoff. The US has cut all aid to South Africa, expelled its envoy, imposed sweeping tariffs, and even skipped critical G20 meetings, all while pushing ahead with the refugee plan for white South Africans. Now, with this tweet on white genocide, the tensions have further escalated as Trump ally and South Africa-born tech billionaire Elon Musk accused the South African government of supporting a white genocide. While South Africa has strongly rejected the allegations, it has been pushing for dialogue. Just yesterday, President Ramaphosa, while hosting Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, spoke with Trump on a call. They discussed the war in Ukraine and also agreed to meet soon to address bilateral issues. Still, the US is moving forward with its punitive measures, even though prominent white South African organizations, some of which once lobbied for the policy, have rejected the resettlement offer. Yet reports suggest up to 70,000 white South Africans have expressed interest in seeking US asylum. The International Organization for Migration, which helps displaced people worldwide, has reportedly declined the Trump administration's request to assist with resettling Afrikaners. So, how will the US move forward with this controversial plan? And how will Pretoria respond? Now, for more on this, we have with us Phumlani Majozi, author and political analyst, who is joining us live from Johannesburg. Thank you for being with us.
Great to be here. Thanks for the invitation.
Phumlani, what does the United States' decision to begin processing asylum seekers' claims from white South Africans signal about its stance on South Africa's domestic land reform policies? And could this be interpreted as a political message, or is it purely an immigration matter?
Well, we can assume at this point that the Trump administration is very serious about the issue, that they've initiated the processing. That shows that they are serious. And I would like to advise your audience that we shouldn't expect the Trump administration to stop this. It will continue, even though the president of South Africa has said that the two of them have decided to, or they plan to have talks in the future. But we shouldn't expect that this process is going to stop. The Trump administration will go ahead because they've taken this issue seriously. They want to, because of the concern of expropriation of land without compensation and other issues as well that we have seen in the country, including things like, kill the farmer rhetoric from some politicians, including things like race-based policies. All those things have been a concern to the Trump administration with respect to South Africa, especially since South Africa has been a beneficiary of the AGOA program, right? This is Africa Growth Opportunity Act. Yes. So the Trump administration has been, because one of the requirements by the US is that if the country is going to benefit from AGOA, it has to meet certain requirements that the American government is comfortable with. So we shouldn't expect this to stop. Let's take it seriously and assume that it's not going to stop. Yes, the talks will begin between South Africa and the US, but the Trump administration will continue to push ahead with these arrangements. Right. South Africa has been a focus, right, and we shouldn't expect that this is going to go away anytime soon.
Yes. Right. And how might this move by the US impact diplomatic relations between the two countries, especially in light of President Ramaphosa's announcement of talks with Donald Trump?
Well, we need to be clear that our government, and I've said this on your show as well before, that is our government wants to improve relations with the US. Now, you might not be happy with some of their actions. We will not be 100%. Not everybody will be happy with the actions of our government in terms of handling the issue. But it's been clear that they do want to fix the relations with the US. So I'm not sure this is going to make our government, Ramaphosa's administration, to say, look, we are not going to talk to you, Mr. Trump, because you've initiated this process of, settling Afrikaners. They will continue to push for the improved relations, given the whole tensions, and hope that at some point there will be an agreement being reached. So I don't think, some people have said that, well, perhaps Ramaphosa's administration will abandon the US and focus more in the East, strengthen trade, bolster trade with China, Russia, India, and so on, and just forget about the US, or reduce the relations with the US. I don't think that's going to happen. Ramaphosa's administration, they do want to improve the relations, and my hope is that these talks between Trump and Ramaphosa, they begin as soon as possible, so the countries can find common ground and reach a trade deal, because it's good for South Africa as a developing country. We do need stronger relations with the United States. They are the second biggest trade partner. And we had a trade surplus with them. So if that can continue, that will be positive for the administration. So I don't think that all this is going to sort of shut down the diplomatic engagements between the two countries. They will go ahead in the upcoming months.
Yes. And Phumlani, what precedent does this set for international asylum protocols? And could it potentially undermine South Africa's sovereign efforts to address historical land inequalities?
Well, here's the thing. You need to understand that between South Africa and the US, there are certain trade relations that were existing before, right? We all know of them, various initiatives, including the AGOA, of course, initiative. And within that, we need to understand that this is a global, it's an international system where nations, they sort of, they choose as to who they work with. And for powers like the United States, if they are going to deal with South Africa, there are things that they will want to be happy with before they can trade with South Africa, before they can offer some financial assistance or whatever, and we cannot fault them for that. It is their their right. Even when it comes to policies that we have, if the US does not like them, Alison, they have a right to say, we don't like these policies, and we are therefore going to adjust our relations with respect to South Africa. Will our sovereignty be had? Look, we'll always be a sovereign state. That needs to, I need your audience to understand this. We'll always be a sovereign state, but we must just remember that whatever actions we take as a nation, some people will never, or some nations will like those actions, some won't. Some nations will like our domestic policies, some won't. It is up to those nations as to how, including the US, as to how it takes our domestic policies and whether it does want to proceed and deal with us in light of those domestic policies.
Yes. Phumlani, it's always great to have you on the show. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
Our next story is on how saying the word sorry is harder than confronting history. White leaders keep showing up in Africa with long speeches and a short memory. They express sorrow and they talk about colonial scars. Yet they never say the word that actually matters. Listen to this.
Our presence here is not innocent, and our history unfolds through the ages. It doesn't fix things. Only you can make this journey, which is also a path of forgiveness that is eminently intimate.
That was French President Emmanuel Macron. He was on a state visit to Madagascar. It is the first time a French leader is visiting a former colony off the east coast of Africa in 20 years. During a remembrance ceremony in Madagascar's capital, he said that he wanted to work toward forgiveness. Macron openly acknowledged France's bloody colonial past. But even as he stood at the event, he avoided offering a direct apology. He said, and I quote, "Only the Malagasy can make this journey of forgiveness," and added that France simply would help create the right conditions for it.
It doesn't fix things. We create the conditions by allowing through this very human, very personal, and very symbolic connection to mourn what is no longer, and sometimes lives that have been separated. These are the destinies of your families.
One such gesture was to return the cultural artifacts. Statements on accepting past wrongs might sound progressive, but it reveals the same old problem that complicates the fight against colonial reparations. Now, it is still France that is setting the terms of engagement. Instead of asking what repair would mean to Malagasy people, Macron decides what France will return. Now, his trip also sheds light on disputes over a small group of islands around Madagascar. Now, these are French overseas territories, which the East African nation claims are theirs. These small islands are called Éparses Islands in France. It falls under French jurisdiction. Madagascar wants its control, but France wants a deal in which they can jointly manage these. Now, Madagascar's president has pushed for a full handover. A new round of talks over the matter is set for the 30th of June. And with the UK negotiating a deal to hand over the Chagas Island to Mauritius, the fight for these islands has reopened old questions. What fair resolution looks like today? Back in 2023, Macron acknowledged that France's brutal 132-year-long colonial rule against Algeria made it clear that he won't apologize to Algeria. Now, this mirrors his calculated moves in Madagascar. He is cautiously taking steps to address past injustices. It appears like a pattern to acknowledge harm without taking full responsibility. And shifting focus to the East African nation of Kenya, it has taken a major step to deepen its partnership with China. Both the sides announced that they have upgraded their ties to a new level. This announcement was made during a meeting between President Xi Jinping and Kenyan President William Ruto in Beijing. This was Ruto's first state visit to China since taking office in 2022. Both leaders committed to building a long-term relationship that would promote stability between China and Africa. It is aimed at establishing a partnership which will safeguard the common interests of developing countries. The move to strengthen ties comes amid a global turbulent political environment. China is seeking to bolster its influence in Africa through the Belt and Road Initiative, or the BRI. Launched in 2013, the BRI aims to extend China's infrastructure worldwide. Kenya has been a key partner in this initiative, and Beijing has given it substantial loans for infrastructure and construction projects. It has built roads, railways, and ports with those funds, and then massive lending makes China Kenya's single biggest bilateral creditor. Now China is stepping in again to help Kenya in a similar plan. The extension of standard gauge railway, it will be running from Naivasha to the Ugandan border. And since 2019, there has been no progress on this initiative. The lack of funds brought Kenya's most ambitious infrastructure project to a grinding halt. On Thursday, Ruto said that China will help Kenya to restart this project. However, his office didn't give out details on the amount that China would be giving and by when it will be completed. Now, adding to this, China also committed to expanding a highway. It will link Nairobi to the Rift Valley in the city of Nakuru. Both state and private Chinese investors will be involved in this. In total, Ruto and Xi signed 20 cooperation agreements. They cover vast areas, including vocational education, e-commerce, water resources, and so on. And direct flights between Beijing and Nairobi and boosting tourism was also a point of discussion. For Kenya, these developments come at a time of economic pressure. It is struggling with a massive debt burden. Repaying loans, especially in foreign currency, has been difficult, And Ruto has pledged that Kenya will not default and his country will pay back the loans on time. Now, China's decision to keep giving financial aid to Kenya could help it to reduce its financial stress. However, this can be a ticking time bomb, culminating in a debt trap. In 2023, Kenya owed Beijing more than $8 billion. Critics say that China lends heavily, knowing repayment may be hard. It gives China strategic leverage. When the borrowing country fails to repay, China demands control of key national assets like ports or land as compensation. Now, reports say at least a dozen countries owe debts to China, and Kenya is one of them. While it continues to welcome China's financial support, it also faces a very delicate balancing act. We'll continue our coverage of how Kenya manages that slippery slope. And our last story today is about an escalating regional dispute. A trade war is brewing between Tanzania, South Africa, and Malawi. Tanzania has banned all agricultural imports from Malawi and South Africa in response to what it claims are unfair restrictions on its own exports. South Africa has long banned the entry of Tanzanian bananas, and last month Malawi blocked imports of flour, rice, ginger, bananas and maize from Tanzania. Tanzania says it is time to protect its economic interests after diplomatic efforts to resolve these trade issues failed. In March, Malawi announced a temporary suspension on imports of certain agricultural products, claiming the measure was designed to protect local farmers. Meanwhile, South Africa defended its ban on Tanzanian bananas, saying it's part of its strict standards to prevent the spread of crop diseases. But Tanzania's sweeping new ban comes at a critical time, as Africa pushes for continent-wide free trade through the African Continental Free Trade Area, launched 4 years ago. All three countries, Tanzania, South Africa and Malawi, are members of the Southern African Development Community, SADC, but these new restrictions are straining regional trade flows. The biggest impact is expected to hit landlocked Malawi, which relies heavily on Tanzanian ports to export its tobacco, sugar and soybeans to global markets. Without access to Tanzanian routes, Malawi will be forced to reroute goods through longer and costlier alternatives. Malawi has become an increasingly important customer for Tanzania, with Tanzanian exports to Malawi tripling between 2018 and 2023, this according to official data. While Tanzania may shift trade to countries like Kenya, Namibia or South Sudan, Malawi faces greater challenges as a landlocked nation. South African exports to Tanzania, including fruits like apples and grapes, will also take a hit. Meanwhile, the Tanzanian government has assured its citizens that the import ban will not affect domestic food security. As tensions rise, this trade dispute could test the unity of regional blocs like SADC and challenge the promise of continent-wide free trade. For now, the stalemate continues, with farmers, exporters and economies caught in the crossfire. We'll be watching how this story unfolds in the weeks ahead. And that's it on the show for today. We will see you again at the same time on Monday. Thank you for watching. Have a great weekend and goodbye.